All right. Hey, what's happening? Word Wrestling Live. We're here, 2 o'clock hour, and we have another amazing wrestling mind in our country. He's the head coach at Shawnee Heights High School. He was the Kansas 5A Coach of the Year. He was College All-American, as well as a three-time academic All-American. He's living out in Topeka now, where he's coaching high school with his wife and 4 kids, and he's got a great new book out that we'll talk about called Game Changing Moves. And let's welcome Coach Chad Parks. Man, what's up, buddy? Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate this.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's an honor to be on your show, and I know you've had a lot of great guests, and I'm excited to be one of them.
Yeah, listen, I tell people all the time I'm like a big kid. I think that my wife said early on in this, like people were hitting me up to come on the show, and like they were asking me like I was important or something, and I'm like, I'm on the other side going, oh my God, you want to come on my show? Yay! Like I still get that feeling, and I think I always will. So it's not just one way. I'm as blessed to have you as maybe you feel to be on. So hopefully I can help and make a difference, and that's cool. But I mean, first things first, obviously, speaking of game changing moves, this off season, something different, man. What have you done to keep yourself sane through this process, and then also your athletes? What have you done to keep their mind right and keep them kind of motivated and just doing something?
Yeah, I mean, so I think Kansas was like the second state in the U.S. that just said, "Hey, we're not going back to school, shut it down," and so that was right after spring break. And for me, like to keep my own mind sane, work out. So I work out a lot anyway, but I just made the decision, man, we're quarantined, so it's going to be daily for me. I gotta move, I gotta do things. And so that's what we did. One of my assistant coaches would come over and we get out in the driveway and just get after it, right? Just work out, social distance and work out. And we couldn't work out with our athletes at the time. So things like Zoom come in big, right? So we're able to Zoom with our athletes, talk to them. I have some text message threads and a couple of apps that we use, and a lot of communication, and that's the thing. It's like, we want to be with our kids. We want our kids to, be able to work out and train with them. But at the same time, man, we got to just check in on them, let them know that we care, let them know that we're here. And I think sometimes, especially for teenagers and younger kids, they don't know how to verbalize what they're feeling. And so just taking a little time to check in on them and to listen. So that's been big for us. And then thankfully, right at the beginning, I think we're on week number 5 of getting to work out with our athletes now. So we're actually training at the school, some real stringent and strict policies at first. Those have loosened up a little bit, but we can have 45 people in a group. So we're running, people because I have my men's wrestling team, my girls wrestling team, and the volleyball team trains with me. So we use our wrestling room, we use the weight room, and we cross back and forth. So we never have more than 45 in a room, and very strict about social distance and cleaning and all that stuff. But tell you what, we're willing to do any of that just to be together and train.
Yeah, and I think it's very important that you said that, because I think the youth, I have a 14 and 11-year-old, and they're never going to tell me that. I mean, they obviously they're human. So do they say this sucks? Do they say they want to get back to school? Do they say they miss their friends? Do they do all that? Yes. But I do agree with you. I think there's a lot of youth out there that you really got to stay in their mind and stay on their head, because this is going to create a lot of social anxiety and a lot of youth anxiety. And I'm just hoping that the kids that struggle with that have the right people around them to get them to the other side of this, where they can feel relieved again.
Yeah, that's a big thing. Mentally, we have 4 children, my wife and I do, and ages 5 all the way to 13. And honestly, our kids did pretty good with online schooling. But man, my older daughter's super social. And so for her, like, it's funny with her and her friends at school, they had to use Zoom with their teachers. And I'm a teacher, so I had to use it. Like, it became like a new social media app for them. They would do their stuff in school, but then at night, it'd be like 8 p.m. and they would have just a huge group on there, just Zooming back and forth, talking. And of course, the novelty, that kind of wore off after a little bit, but they were able to stay in communication. One of my daughters is a little more, she's not quite the social butterfly. So for her, she would still just maybe talk to 1 or 2 friends at a time, but it's big, the mental health component. And that's something I saw as a teacher speaking with other teachers, speaking with parents, hearing, feedback from parents. A lot of people, a lot of kids just gave up on school during that time. A lot of people, and I think some of it was mom and dad were home, but some of them still had to go to work, right? And then these kids are at home by themselves, and they're just locked in. They had nobody to talk to, and it was rough. It was really rough. So we're thankful to have a little more freedom now, but I think more than anything at that time, I really saw the social aspect that our kids need.
Yeah, isn't it amazing how alike but different siblings are? Like there's so much, they're family, so they have a lot of those like traits. But like my 14-year-old is like the social guy, like, hey, I want my friends. The little one, I'm like, hey, fine, if you don't do that, you're not going to be allowed to go back to school. And he's like, fine, no problem, I don't care, I'll stay home.
Yeah.
He's just as happy being home in his room as he is anywhere else. So, but the other one is like, no way, I'm not going to do this. At some point, I'll just risk getting it and I'm going out. But
Yeah,
it's crazy how that works. But first of all, talk about Shawnee Heights, the wrestling program you have there, what you're building there, kind of Kansas wrestling. I know you come from Oklahoma, which is a hotbed. What has Kansas done? What's the wrestling scene in Kansas, and how has it grown, and how has your program grown?
Yeah, Kansas wrestling is strong right now, man. It's on the come up, and I can say when I very first came to Shawnee Heights, I walked in and I followed a coach who was kind of a legend at Shawnee Heights. He did a great job really building the program. They never quite reached what he wanted, but he positively impacted a lot of lives and had a lot of successful wrestlers. But this was a big thing for me. They never had any home meets. They would have like dual meets. They had like a red, white night, which is like a scrimmage at the beginning of the year to see who's varsity. And then they traveled a lot, and we still travel a lot. But, coming from Oklahoma, where we have a dual state tournament and a regular state tournament, duels were part of what we did. And then as a college wrestler, duels are part of that. And so I'm like, oh, we got to have some home duels. So we begin to implement those. And I'm used to growing up in Oklahoma, where literally it's kind of like football. Friday Night Lights is a real thing in Oklahoma and in Texas, especially in the small school, because there's nothing else to do in the town. So we have a dual meet, there'd be 3,000 people there.
Wow.
This is a high school dual meet. So all of a sudden I'm here at Shawnee Heights, and we, have our first ever home dual meet 14 years ago. But there's like 50 people in the stands, and I'm like, what is going on? They weren't used to having home dual meets. And so in my mind, it was just unreal. And so we really put a lot into, I would say, branding, getting the school and the community excited about what we're doing in our sport. And of course, you've got to have success along the way to do that. And we've had a lot of success. But now, like, you come to our meets, and this is something else that we did intentionally, but it's like going to a UFC fight. Like, we have our own rap song, we have our own team song. We run out through a tunnel like football does, with smoke and lights, and we have, like I said, it's our own team song and talks about our team, has our motto built into it. And then every wrestler has their own walkout song onto the mat. And I have to teach my guys ahead of time, especially if they're freshmen and they grew up watching that. Like, hey, none of this is for you, right? Your job is to walk out there and shake hands and wrestle and focus and control what you can. This is for the fans. Because I want, mom and dad or relatives are going to come watch you anyway. But I want someone who's never seen wrestling, a student, or, just someone that lives in our city, to watch the match and leave and go, I'm not sure what was going on, but that was super exciting. And I have people email me, I have people call me. We bring in other coaches. So like our football coach or baseball coach, and they're the guests that week, and they sit on the bench with us during the dual meet. And I can't tell you how many times I've had a coach, and then the next morning I walk into the school and they're waiting outside of my office, like, I'm still pumped from last night, and
That's
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. So doing those kind of things to really build up our sport and make it exciting. Because for us wrestling people, like, we love it, right? We see the minute things that go on in a match. But for people that don't know wrestling, I think if it's quiet in the gym and they're just, all you can hear is the two guys wrestling and nobody's cheering, they're used to like a football type or a basketball type atmosphere. And so as wrestling coaches, man, we got to put some emphasis on really building that thing up. But so for our program, we've been able to build a lot, have a lot of success, culture wise, buy-in. And then I'll move on to Kansas in general. I coached on our Kansas national team for a number of years in freestyle and Greco, and we did real well. Annually, we're really strong in Greco. And I think a big part of that is we kind of put a focus on it here in Kansas where a lot of states don't. In Oklahoma, it's like everybody freestyles and some guys Greco, you know, and up here, like we really try to focus a lot on Greco. And so we've had a number of highly successful wrestlers in that avenue. But if you look at Division I schools, Division II schools outside of our state that recruit our kids, I mean, every year we have some hammers that are wrestling in other places. And now I will say, I think we have like 13 or maybe it's even 15 schools that have wrestling now in college in Kansas.
Oh, nice.
But no Division I schools. So we're often sending our athletes out, you know, Kendrick Maple, you know, who goes to OU and is an undefeated national champion. He's a Kansas kid, you know, I mean, we've had a lot of those stories. So hopefully at some point we can have a Division I school, but our other schools do really well here. And just overall in general, it's growing, you know, the sport is growing. USA Wrestling, if you look at our numbers, they are huge. Our USA Wrestling numbers for kids is huge. So Kansas is on the come up. I like to brag on them a little bit. I take my team to Oklahoma and we wrestle a couple times a year down there and we hold our own. We do it really well. So that's a source of pride for me.
Good. That's awesome. Yeah, talk about it. That's why you're on here. So talk about game-changing moves, the thought process behind it, your new book, for those that don't know. I think it was on my art thing that I sent out, but he's got a new book out called Game-Changing Moves. So I'm sure when we get off, he'll post a link in the room and stuff, and feel free. But talk about what is it about? What's the thought process behind it? And well, you know, obviously it's your book, but what's the game changer behind it? Why should people be reading this book and taking it into, you know, their heart?
Yeah. So I would say probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I began to blog. So I'm a wrestling coach, and I mean, like a lot of people wear a lot of hats, right? So I'm an entrepreneur. I do some other things as well. And I had people, and I would run some leadership meetings, and people would be like, man, you should start blogging about this stuff and teach people. And at the time, I'm a reader. I read a lot, but I'm like, dude, I don't even read blogs, you know? And anyway, but that came around a few times where more than one person was saying it, and it would just come up. And so I kind of started looking around, and actually some of my favorite authors also ran really popular blogs. And so finally at one point I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to do it. So I think I just got like a really generic blog off of, you know, created really generic blog off of Google or something. And
Yeah, like WordPress.
Yeah. So I put it out there, I put it on social media, and it got really good response. So I wrote another one and it got really good response. And then long story short on this, I just made the decision. I'm going to write 2 blogs a week, no matter what. I'm going to create a great habit. Okay. So it's like in life, I feel like that's something we got to do, whether it's your fitness, sleeping, exercise, eating, whatever. If you want to be high level at anything, create high level habits. So I decided I'm going to blog twice a week, no matter how I feel. And then I'm going to put those out there. So that's what I began to do. And these would get great feedback. I mean, I'd be at the grocery store and somebody would come up and be like, oh man, your newest blog, or tell me about it. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. And for me, I wanted to make a positive impact, right? And so that was one of the reasons I was really doing it. Fast forward, I assumed at some point I would write a book, but honestly, I thought, okay, when I'm in my 50s or 60s or something, I'll write a book. And well, I have a good friend of mine. He owns a multi-billion-dollar business actually here in Topeka, and he knows the things I write about. I wrote a kid's story, a children's story for my family over Christmas about the nativity scene from the purpose or from the point of view of an animal. The Christmas chicken is what it was called. All right. One of my sons, my wife and kids, they have this tradition they do every year. Normally I'm at wrestling practice when they started, but then I come home and they're making sugar cookies and using Christmas tree cutouts and things like that. And one of my sons was adamant about using a chicken cutout. And so I get home, my wife's like, oh, look at the Christmas chicken, you know, and like, I'm like, oh, that's awesome, son. He was like, yeah. So I go in and I just write this nativity story from the viewpoint of the animals that are at the nativity scene. And it's called The Christmas Chicken. Come back, I read it to my family, and my wife is like, seriously, that's better than any kid's book we own. You should publish that. And I was like, for real? And she said, yeah. And I was just doing it to like play around. So anyway, so long story short, I contact my buddy and I say, hey, do you know anyone who helps publish books? He says, yeah, I do. Well, he knows all the things I write about leadership and coaching and all these things. So he actually connects me to a guy who's helped a couple of New York Times bestsellers. And he connects us via email. This guy writes me, hey, dude, let's meet up. We're going to have coffee. And all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, man, this guy's like legit. I can't take him to Christmas chicken. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe that's the book he wants.
Yeah. So, and, and my buddy had told him about the coaching things I write about. And these principles, this is a big thing for me. I believe principles are principles. And once you understand them, you can apply them anywhere. Right. So that's why you can study a high level businessman. That's why you can study. It's like this, like you can believe in gravity or not, it doesn't matter. But if you go jump off of a 10-foot wall, you're going to fall 10 feet. So once you understand that principle, now it can be applied to flying. Now it can be applied to suspension bridges, things like that. So I write about all these principles, and he told the guy that. So I meet with this guy, and he says, okay, what are your thoughts? And so I tell him the things I write about. And this was over Christmas break a couple years ago. And he says, okay, well, I know you're busy. This is wrestling season, but I want to have the book. I want to have the manuscript in my hands by spring break. And I'm like, oh man. And he said, the reason I'm doing that is because I'm forcing you to have a timeline and get it done, or else who knows how long this will go. Well, even though I've been writing a lot and I had a lot of content, I had no idea how to write a manuscript. So I'm like, have to teach myself. I'm Googling like, what font do I use? What's the format going to look like? If I'm going to turn this into some company to try to get a book deal, what should it be like, right? So I go through, teach myself. Long story short, I get to spring break. Long story long, I guess. Get spring break. And my wife, I tell her, I say, hey, I'm going to go down to the basement, which I'm in my office right now in my basement. And I say, I'm going to go down there. I'm going to lock myself in for as long as it takes. You got to watch the kids. And I'm going to put this manuscript together. And I wrote the entire book in 2 days. But when I say I wrote the entire book in 2 days, I had a ton of content from all these blogs I've been writing for a couple of years now, twice a week, right? And thank goodness for data, I could go back and see which blogs were shared the most on social media, which were viewed the most through Google Statistics and things like that. And then which ones are going to fit into the ideas I have for the book. So I get it all put together. I take the guy the manuscript. I'm super nervous now because, like I said, he's legit. I think I'm a writer, but I'm like, so he's like, okay, I'm going to read this and I'll call you in a couple of weeks. We'll get back together. And so we do get back together, and I'm like sweating bullets because I think he's going to tell me this is terrible. And that's pretty much how he starts. He says, I get a lot of manuscripts and they're normally really bad. This is not it. This is awesome. And we need to put it out there to the world. And I'm like, for real? And he said, yeah. And I was like, yes. Yeah. But then he's like, but you got to find a publisher. I'm like, oh, I thought you were helping me with that, And this just tells you how small and how awesome the wrestling world is. I send an email out to a few wrestling people that I know that are pretty connected around the nation and say, hey, I have this manuscript. I wrote this book. There's a lot of wrestling stuff in there for coaches and athletes. Does anybody here know a publisher? A guy that I've only met in person once, and we've like maybe contacted a couple of times on social media, email, he sends me an email like 2 days later. It got to him. He sends it to a bunch of people, and he works for the NWCA. And he says, everybody says, contact this company in Nebraska. They publish for Fellowship of Christian Athletes, but they also, Tom Osborne and all Ron Brown and all these big time football coaches, contact them. I'm like, awesome. So I contact them, and the guy's like, well, I'm willing to read your manuscript, the owner of the company, Cross Training Publishing. And so he reads it, contacts me and says, let's do it. Let's publish your book. And so that's how it all came about. The purpose behind it is this. My dad's a
the guy from New York. Who was he?
Or the guy, yes, he was the guy from the NWCA, but he sent it all around.
He's the guy that you gave the manuscript first to.
Oh yeah, the guy that gave the manuscript first to. He's like, so the guy that owns the multi-billion-dollar company here, they kind of subcontract to this guy. It's a financial advising company. And a lot of their people go to him with writings and stuff like that.
And he's just kind of the proofer and says, okay.
And he gives them ideas and things like that. So that's what he did for me.
Garbage or not. And
exactly.
That's cool, man. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. So yeah, and that guy was highly successful. Like I said, he's helped all these other people write books. And so he was able to tell me, he said like, hey, I would take this out. I would add a chapter about this. And so he gave me ideas. And so I went back in and I did exactly what he told me because he knows way more than I do. Anyway, so the point behind the book is this. My dad's a National Hall of Fame wrestling coach, right? So I'm real fortunate I grew up with a dad who was an amazing coach. And then I've actually had 3 coaches that are in the National Wrestling Hall of Fame, which is crazy. I always say like I should have been a much better wrestler. I was good, but I should have been even better with that kind of
Seems like you're a great coach.
Yeah, I think I'm a pretty decent coach. So, but I'm always trying to learn, and that's something I learned from my dad, right? Always trying to learn and get better, find a better way all the time. But I just thought about it. I'm like, okay, I'm putting these things out in a blog, and you're a dad, and so this was one of the key aspects. One day, I want my children to look back and to really know their dad, not only the relationship I had with them, but I want them to like literally be able to grab something or read about it. Because one of the great things about books is it's one of the few opportunities you have to really get inside of somebody's head, because all these things are in their head are coming out on paper. So now you have the opportunity to kind of get into their world, right? So it's an opportunity for me to teach my children. Someday they can read it, they can pass it on to their kids, so on and so forth. Now, I also had all these great, and my dad's just a phenomenal storyteller, and he teaches a lot through story. But I had all these great stories growing up. When you're young, like those things don't even, you're just like, oh, whatever, it's my dad, or whatever, it's, my coach. And then you become an adult and you look back and you realize how much value there was in those. So as a coach, I realized how often I was teaching all these things that my dad used, or one of my college coaches used, or these other coaches that have mentored me. I'm like, you know what? I don't want these things to be lost. I want to literally get them written down and to impact more than just my wrestling team. And of course you can impact a lot of people through your team, because now I impact one of them. They become a coach someday, or a teacher, or whatever job they're in, they impact somebody, and then the butterfly effect, it spreads. But I want these lessons to get out there as much as possible. So that was kind of the purpose behind the book. I've just been so blessed with, like I said, great mentors and coaches in my life. And it wasn't even just them. I mean, when I was growing up, I cut grass. By the time I was a senior in high school, I had 35 yards. And I would have elderly people that I mowed for who, this is, small town Oklahoma. And I just knew, like, okay, I have Miss Core's yard today, or I have Miss Wade's yard today. That's got to be my last, like, I'm going to say Miss Wade, because she was a widower, or a widow. So I had to go over and I'm going to mow her yard. And then afterward, we're going to have at least a 1 hour conversation on her front porch, because she needs someone to talk to, right? And she was awesome. But as I would get to talk to these people, they would just teach me. And so I'm learning all these lessons at this time from people who had experienced life and done a lot of things in life. So there are stories in the book that aren't just from coaches, but things I learned from people that poured into me as I was growing up. And so all these lessons apply again. And I try to tell the story. I have principles. I have questions at the end of every chapter, so you can go through and you can figure out how do these things apply to your life. And I'm a Christian, so I have scripture that backs up every single thing that I talk about and backs up all the principles. So if you're a Christian, you can use this. A lot of colleges, especially NCAA schools, which are private schools, are currently using my book, and they use it as a book study with their athletes. And I think I have 20 some colleges that are using it with their athletes. Anyway, so all the chapters are really short. I don't have a long attention span, and I think people's attention spans are getting shorter. And so on purpose, every chapter is its own thing. They don't connect one from the other. Each one is its own lesson. And some people call this airplane books, because I could be reading it on the airplane, get off and read it 2 days later and pick up on a new chapter, and I don't have to remember where I was. And again, they're short chapters, and so your attention span doesn't have to be long, but you also have a way to apply what you're learning.
That's awesome. And where can we, and now, first of all, when we get off, please go into the Ward Wrestling Room with your video on your interview, and in the links, put how we can, first of all, we're going to talk about your podcast too, but put how we can get your book and how we can get your scripture and how we can hear from Coach Chad Parks. And then also join my little private group that I started. You'll see it, just hit groups. It's, if you haven't yet, it's Ward Wrestling Live Exchange. So where we can exchange thoughts and whatever, right?
Awesome.
Feel free to post your positive scripture in there daily if you want to, but also put in there your book and your podcast. Feel free to post your podcast on all my stuff too. It's all wrestling. It's all good stuff. So what's mine is yours, and please use it. But for the purpose of while we're live, where do we go to get your book?
Yeah, most people get off Amazon. So just type in Chad Parks on Amazon or Game Changing Moves, and it'll come up there. It was the #1 Amazon bestseller for a while, and it's still doing pretty well. Or crosstrainingpublishing.com. So you can go to crosstrainingpublishing.com and get it off of their website or Amazon.
And not only do you get to read his stories, but if you want to hear him, he's got a Coach P's Perspective podcast on Tell Us.
Yeah, you can get it. I mean, you can listen to that pretty much anywhere podcasts are. So on, iTunes or Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Play. And I think we posted pretty much anywhere. So as soon as I go live on a podcast or publish it, it goes out to all those different sites.
Yeah, I think I use Anchor. So
yes, it's on Anchor as well.
Yeah, so I use Anchor is where I put it, and then Anchor is the one that feeds it out to. You use the same one?
I use Libsyn, which is like the same thing, but all the same places it goes out to through Anchor, it goes out through Libsyn as well.
I just can't figure out how to. You have to control it all through your feeding site, though. You can't go to those individual places, and I haven't figured that all out yet. But all I know is I feed it and it gets fed, so I'm good. Right?
Yes. Yeah, they use the RSS feed and send it out to those. So
yeah. So is it weekly, monthly, daily?
So I started the podcast, I don't know, during this quarantine, and it's something, I do a lot of public speaking and I travel and speak a lot. And so again, kind of like the blogs, people were like, dude, why don't you have a podcast? And I'm a podcast fiend. I just subscribe to yours.
Good.
I have a huge list of podcasts to listen to. So I love music, but if I'm driving in the car by myself, I'm usually listening to a podcast. If I'm doing dishes or working outside, I'm listening to a podcast. I want to grow my mind, feed my spirit constantly. Very intentional about what I'm putting in. So people were like, why don't you have a podcast? And I was like, oh, I need to start one. And you can want to take action. You can decide you're going to take action, but at some point you actually have to take action, right?
Right.
Yeah. And so finally I was like, and I'm busy. That was always the excuse. But finally over quarantine, I'm like, oh, I'm kind of not busy now. So I should do it. And so I started looking at some of my favorite podcasters. How often do they, because like anything, I want to be really good at it if I'm going to do it. Right. And so I started like researching, what's the best time to put out a podcast and best days, but also my favorite podcasters, Todd Durkin, The Impact Show. There's a bunch of them, Brian Buffini, John Gordon, who's written all kinds of New York Times bestsellers. And this is so cool. In life, there are so many high level people that if you just reach out and ask questions, a lot of times they'll give you answers. So I actually just sent messages via Instagram to a couple of these people who are way out of my realm in my mind, right? New York Times, like multiple time New York Times bestsellers. Todd Durkin is Drew Brees' trainer, and Michael Chandler, the Bellator champions trainer, and has written multiple time best-selling books himself. I just sent him like, hey, how often do you put a podcast out? And what's your purpose behind that? And then they told me. And actually, those are two of my favorite guys. And they both said, well, right now over quarantine, we're doing it twice a week because we just want to add positive to people's lives. Initially, I was going to put out one a week. But then I was like, you know what? I want to do the same thing. So I put out 2 times a week. Typically, one is solo. So it's me talking and giving some sort of lesson. A lot of those come from my book, but via podcast, I'm able to go much deeper and really like the story behind the story and really talk about the principles deeper. And then once a week, I have a guest on. And so kind of like you, have a big list of guests, and I have some really great ones I've had on. I have a huge list of people that have committed that I'll still be going in, and many are from the wrestling world, and get to hear their stories and what makes them tick and what has made them successful, those type of things. But yeah, so twice a week, one solo and then one with the guest every single week consistently.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you on reaching. I mean, because look, I've reached out to you. Came on. I reached out. I DM'd. I DM'd Barry Davis. He called me through Facebook and reached me out, and I had him on yesterday. I DM'd Dennis Hall, and he's like, yeah, no problem. I'll come on. Like I never thought or imagined Lee Kemp, the guy that's coming on next, sent me a DM and was like, hey, you know who Lee Kemp is? I'm like, yeah. I don't have to be a wrestler to know who that guy is. I mean, just have to be American, right? And I was like, yeah. He's like, all right, here's his cell. Hit him up. I'm like, Lee Kemp's cell phone number? I'm like, holy moly, right? And
Yeah.
I hit him up. Boom, the next morning, he's like, yeah, I'm in. Let's do it. Let's do it tomorrow. I'm like, okay, I'll make room. Yeah. And so it's like amazing how these people just hit you back up. And it's funny. The ones that are legit superstars and legit excellent careers and are just, they don't just, not the ones that just think they're better than you. I think they're great. Like the ones who are actually great and made a difference.
Yeah.
I mean, they hit you up all the time. And then when you hit up the ones that are like just, I don't know, the ego guys think they're great, talk a lot. They're like, I'm too good for you. You know, I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, we're good. You know, I mean, they don't message you back, I'm too good for you, but you kind of
Yeah.
get the door shut in your face, things like that. And that's okay because um, I don't, big names are not what I'm after. I'm after any name and I'm after anybody that can create a voice and talk about wrestling and do like what you're doing. So I don't care if you're an 8-year-old or an 80-year-old. If you want to talk wrestling and you have a purpose and give back, let's do it. You know. So to me, I tell people everybody's a big name, but I'm also not an idiot. I mean, I know the levels of some of the people I've had on are like, wow, that's pretty cool. Like people are telling me, you just had that guy on. I'm like, yeah, pretty cool. Like,
Yeah.
you know, it's to
Yeah.
me. But yeah, I agree, man. If you just hit these people up, most of them, for the most part, um, they write me back or they
Yeah.
message me. It's pretty cool. Or if I just ask a question, I've had people that haven't come on. Um, Mr. Jim Thrall, who has Wrestlers Only,
Hmm.
and I'm early on. I was messaging with him all the time, asking him, "Hey, how have you grown your wrestling only to 83,000 people?" You know, and he was just telling me what to do and kind of just stay consistent and things like that. So yeah, a lot of folks are very helpful, especially in this wrestling world, man. It's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a couple of big things that you said there, talking about like having an 8 or 80-year-old on. I literally remember, like I said, my dad's in the Hall of Fame, right? So I literally remember being, I think I was in college and we had a weekend off or something, and I got to come home and see my family. And there was a kids tournament going on, and we knew some people that were wrestling in it. So we go to this kids tournament, and we're walking around talking to some people, and this kid goes out and he beats someone. He's like a 9-year-old, and he comes off the mat, and my dad's like, "Hey, hold on." And he walks over and he says, "Hey, what was that setup you did right there?" And he's like asking this kid technique questions. And this kid and his dad are like going, they have no idea who my dad is. But that like there just showed me like, you should always be able to learn. Your ego shouldn't be too big. You can learn from anybody, right? That was one. And then the other is, like you said, I mean, you can hit up these amazing people. If they say no, they say no. But like, what's the, yeah, so you reach out, you DM somebody and they don't respond, or they say no, cool, go to the next person. But
Right.
in life, like, we all need to have mentors. You should always have people who are like a board of advisors for you, right? Iron sharpens iron people. And some of those are people that you know really well, but some of those could be the books you read or someone you reach out to. You know what? This guy has already done what I want to do at a really high level. What's the, reach out to them. And then like all of a sudden they start to give you advice and they teach you and they kind of become a mentor for you. Man, could you ask for more than that? And some people just literally don't have the time, but a lot more people than I think the general public would think are willing to help.
Yeah, like I can't. Um, I mean, I wouldn't have 200 and whatever shows I have now if it wasn't for people. You know, every day people will send me, "Hey, have you thought about Joe Schmo?" I'm like, no, who's he? I don't know him. Here, message him. He's great wrestling. He was a 2-time this, 3-time that, 1-time this, 4-time that, two, whatever. And I'm like, okay, I'll hit him up. Yeah, I send him a link, right? And it's kind of just how I get my stuff. But I know before we get into my 10 questions and stuff, I know something that's really, really, really important to you is your fellowship of Christian athletes and your Young Life and Wrestlers for Christ. So talk
Yeah.
about those programs that you have and obviously what you're doing with them.
Yeah. So for me, I didn't grow up in the church, and my dad taught me to pray when I was a young kid, but I did not grow up going to church. And my first year of college, actually met a guy who played for Odessa Permia High School, the whole Friday Night Lights movie. Like those were literally his teams. They won state championships and all that stuff. He had the rings, but
That's cool.
yeah. So I met him in college. We lived in the same dorm, and he kept inviting me to church. And at some point, I think I was just tired of like saying no or whatever. And I was like, okay, I'll go to church. And so I started going to church with this guy, and it was awesome. And I ended up giving my life to Christ. And so that really transformed me as a person, who I am. And then I saw my wrestling different. Now my wrestling was no longer just me trying to be great. It was me trying to use my platform to shine it on something bigger. And so from that point on, wrestling and coaching, that's what I try to do. I try to take my platform and then use it to shine a light on God, and then to build into other people's lives into a positive way, right? And Fellowship of Christian Athletes, here in Kansas, we have Wrestlers for Christ. It's an organization we have, which is a lot like Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And then Young Life. These are all, so Fellowship of Christian Athletes, one of the big things that they do is reach the coach. And there are a lot of times that we're trying to reach the athletes. We're trying to reach the youth. That's what I do for a living, right? But if you can reach the coach and pour into his life, and a lot of coaches are lonely, man. A lot of coaches, it's like anybody that's in like a leadership position. So if you're in a leadership position, you're always pouring into somebody else, but who's pouring into you? And you get drained. And so
is that why you have the huddles and stuff?
yes. So a big thing the FCA does is pour into the coach. And, so that's one of the things I love about it. We're able to positively impact the coaches. And like I do every Tuesday, I have an FCA Bible study that I'm a part of via Zoom. And this started over quarantine, but it's a bunch of college coaches and FCA guys from California. And I'm in Kansas. But I've had one of the guys that helps run it. He has used my book, and Menlo University, who's phenomenal NAIA wrestling program, men's and women's, he's used it with them. And, we've developed this relationship. So I get to get on, and we just, we get to iron sharpens iron and kind of pour into one another. And a lot of coaches deal with the same things, right? So now we actually have a place where we can discuss those things. So that's a big reason for me why FCA has been real important. And then Wrestlers for Christ here in Kansas, we put on wrestling camps. We'll try to positively impact the youth. People pray before tournaments. If anybody wants to come and pray, they can. No one's forced to, but that happens through Wrestlers for Christ. So these organizations have been big. And then the high school that I'm at, FCA is big, but so is Young Life. And so my wife and I get to be a part of that. We help host small group Bible studies for juniors and seniors in high school. I have some guys right now. I have a guy who's just an absolute stud Division I football player for Kansas State University, defensive end. And it's funny because I love this young man, right? I actually coached him. He was in my Bible study for years. I'm a diehard Oklahoma Sooners fan. I'm a diehard OU fan, grew up in Oklahoma. So last year I go to the K-State Oklahoma football game, and I'm hoping this young man, his name is Wyatt Hubert, I'm hoping Wyatt has a good game, but not so good, right? Like I want Wyatt to have a good game, but I want my students to put a whooping on him. Yeah. And Wyatt, he sacks Jalen Hurts 3.5 times and has the best game of his life. And OU ends up getting beat by K-State. My in-laws are all K-State people, so I have to live with that for a whole year. You know?
That was I was really hoping to see Jalen Hurts have I would have liked nothing more than to see Oklahoma, Alabama, and see Jalen Hurts put it on them. But
absolutely.
Yeah, but they had a pretty good team themselves. But it seems like those boys out in Clemson have something to say about all this right now.
Oh man, I tell you what, Clemson's got it going on. Dabo Swinney, that dude can coach.
Yeah,
and I love those other programs, but I like Dabo Swinney, but whether you're a Clemson fan or Dabo fan or not, that guy is getting results, and he's positively impacting a lot of people in the process. So.
For sure, man, it's awesome. Yeah, I had Dez. I know him as like Dez M80 because that's his Instagram, and he's the FCA guy down in South Florida. And I had him on earlier, and it was really cool talking to him because he spoke about how you get with the coaches, but you're teaching the coaches to create better people. There was a term you guys had where I forget what it was called, but it was really cool how you're teaching them how to coach differently.
Yeah. So to the athletes, through the coach is what a lot of people say, but there's 3D coaching is a big thing in FCA. There's a great book, 3-Dimensional Coaching, and a lot of coaches. So you have like a pyramid, and technique is at the bottom. So everybody does that, right? It doesn't matter what sport you're in. You have to go in and teach people how to do your sport. So you're doing the physical conditioning and you're doing all the technical parts of the sport. Then the next part of that is like the psychology. And I'm also a mindset coach for wrestling mindset. But so you have the mindset portion or the psychology portion. And then at the top of that, you have what we call like the heart. And so, the guy that wrote 3D coaching, and I don't know the exact stats, but, they went through and did years and years of research, and, almost every coach does the technical part, but it's only like I want to say 30 or 40% of the coaches actually do the mindset or the coaching part when it comes to psychology. And then it's like 10% of the people do the heart, which is creating relationships, right? And so for me, it's actually the number one chapter in my book, Relational Leadership, is creating relationships with your athletes, with your students, with the people. I tell you what, man, the coaches that I would run through a wall for, it's because I have a relationship with them. And, my dad, my college coach, they created that relationship. So then they're able to hold me accountable. Then they're able to push me. They're able to take me to the next level. Like, I think my wall is here, and they're like, nope, your wall is back here, mentally, physically, But if you don't have that relationship, you can only do that for so long with the kid before they push back, So rules without relationship lead to rebellion. But once you have that relationship, you can just keep pushing it back, and then they become way better than they ever thought they could. So that's a big thing in FCA, is being able to help coaches become transformational coaches, not transactional coaches, and then to be able to do it through those levels. So we want to help transform lives in every area, whether you believe in Jesus or not. We want to help kids transform their lives in every area, and not just transactional, where like, hey, if you win, it makes me look good. And there are coaches that are out there like that, right? And if you don't win, I have nothing to do with you. That's not how it should be. I got to pour myself into you as a coach, no matter what, to help you become not only good now on the wrestling match or the football field or whatever, but then to become a good member of society, and hopefully a good dad and a good husband one day, really good at business or whatever else that you're doing. So that's our ultimate goal.
I agree. And that's a great goal to have.
Yeah.
It's awesome. All right. Are you ready?
Yes, sir.
All right. So Kansas barbecue, ribs or brisket?
Brisket.
The Topeka Zoo or Adventure Cove?
Topeka Zoo.
I hope I got these foods right. Beer rocks or burgers?
I would say burgers, and it's funny because I wrestled at 3 schools in college, and the last one I wrestled at was Fort Hays State University in Hays, Kansas, way out in western Kansas, and it is a German town. I grew up on an Indian reservation in Oklahoma. I knew nothing about German food, so the first time I went out and people had beer rocks, I'm like, what is this? But I tell you what, that German food is delicious. So
it looked good.
Do what?
It looked like German's version of a burger.
Kind of, exactly. Yeah. It's like a meat pie, basically. But I'm still going to go with burgers. But man, yeah, if anybody gets a chance to eat some of that real German food, it's legit.
That's awesome. All right, Evel Knievel Museum or the Discovery Center?
Discovery Center. Only because I have 4 children and they love it there.
More German stuff, I think. Grebel or Lefse? Lefse, did I say that right?
I have no idea what either one.
Like,
I'm not a native Kansas.
All right. The Museum of History or the Combat Air Museum?
Combat Air Museum.
Loose meat sandwich or pork tenderloin?
Pork tenderloin.
I guess loose meat sandwich is just the Kansas version of a sloppy Joe or something.
Yes. Yeah. And it's still pretty delicious too.
The state capitol or the Brown versus Wade Center?
Brown versus Board.
Yeah, Brown versus Board. Is Brown versus Board?
Yeah. So, I don't know. They're both here in Topeka where I live. So we live in the capital, and both of them are really cool, man. So there's a lot of historical significance in both.
Cool. Fried chicken or Kansas City barbecue chicken?
Oh man. You know what? I'm going with fried chicken, but that's just because I'm from the South. I'm from Oklahoma, and my mom is from Southern Oklahoma, and she does some Southern cooking. So I'm gonna say fried chicken.
I like it. And then Lake Shawnee or Gage Park?
Lake Shawnee. That's right out here where we live. It's in the Shawnee Heights School District. Lake Shawnee is. So
awesome. Well, it looks like there's a lot to do in Topeka, Kansas. I was seeing a lot of cool stuff, and it's crazy how I know some people, I get some feedback about the way I do this, but it's so cool for me to learn. We have this whole racial thing and blah 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 going on, and obviously it has to happen, and we have to talk about it. But culturally, I research these foods, like delicacies from each part of the country every day as I have new people on. And Kansas, I'm thinking, the hell, German food? What the hell is this in Kansas? I'm thinking barbecue. They're going to be like, barbecue ribs and fancy briskets. And because in our mind, we think that, but German culture, German brought up. I mean, it's crazy the delicacies around the country that n- nobody, I don't have any place where I'm like, all right, it's American food. Like, there's no
Yeah.
such thing. Like, it's all different culturally, and it's pretty cool. From the South, you get that, that Southern barbecue, and out there, German, and up, I got some Dutch, some other places, and up in Wisconsin, you get the different foods, and it's just so amazing how diverse America is, really.
Yeah, it is, and I love it, man. I mean, I love the diversity. I grew up in a diverse area, and yeah, I tell you what, you want to learn about a culture, learn about their food. That's a great thing. I'm glad you went through and asked those questions and brought that up. And um, I feel like in Oklahoma we have some really good barbecue too. But tell you what, yeah, you go to Kansas City, and there are so many good places to eat over there. I would say Gates Barbecue is my favorite. Gates is it's the real deal, but I don't know that I've eaten at any of the kind of famous barbecue joints and walked out of there and been like, oh, that wasn't good. Like I walked out of there and been like, that's really good.
Yeah, growing up as like a football fan or baseball fan, I only see the foods that they show you at the tailgates when they're coming on TV or whatever. So those states, you think that, you never think that that's German, Asian. Like I was in, I don't know, one of the California towns, and it's like all like not even China. It wasn't Chinese. It was like Korean.
Yeah.
And then there was one area that was more like Thai or Vietnamese, and one area that was like more Dutch or whatever. It's pretty awesome to. People ask me why I changed. At the beginning, I was asking mostly wrestling questions, but I changed to have my own little spin on it. But it's really been amazing learning about these different areas. I think it's cool for kids too. If they go to college in Kansas, and I'm talking to a coach there, and he's like, "We got the best pizza joint," and you're a pizza guy, you're going to be happy when you go there, right? So it's little
Absolutely.
things like that. So, but man, Coach Parks, this has been a blessing for me, and an honor to talk to you and listen to you. And I think, man, I think I could be on here with you for hours and just talk about your book. I'm very interested. I can't wait till you post a link so I can go on and get a book. And man, appreciate what you're doing for everybody and kids and wrestling. And I love it. And please post your information on how people can get you as a speaker, how they can get you as a camp coach, how they can get you your book, how they can get you with FCA. As we know, it's big everywhere. We have FCA down here too.
Hmm.
And I don't know, every way someone can get touched by you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll put those links in there. Yeah, thanks for having me on. I mean, like you said, it's a blessing for me too to get to be on here. And this wrestling world, we are well, my wife used to tease me a little bit because even though like I've spoken in front of thousands of people and I'm 100% comfortable doing it, if you put me in a room with 15 people I didn't know, like she's way more of a social butterfly than I am. But for me, I'll be looking for some cauliflower ears somewhere, right? So then
Yeah.
I can have a conversation with. So that's us in the wrestling world. It's so small. Like you can talk to anybody that's in the wrestling world and you guys will know some of the same people. It's like this little fraternity that we have. And it's really not that little, right? It's expansive, but wrestlers are wrestlers and they love wrestling people. And so thank you for getting the word out about wrestling more, making so many connections for many of us and being able to spread this passion that we have.
Yeah, it's been great for me too, because unfortunately we're in this quarantine now, but nothing lasts forever. So
Mm.
eventually, the good doctors and people are going to have a shot for us and some cures, and we're going to get through this, whether it's 6, 9, 10 months down the road. But I can't wait to be a wrestling parent again
Yeah.
in at the tournaments, because I'm so interested in seeing my perspective is going to be different, because starting this, I didn't expect to start to get so educated, right? So the people that I've met and the coaches I've met have poured into me just by me asking those questions. I've gotten that right. And then I've went on and I've taken like some free courses on the NFHS about refing or whatever, so that when I see something being called, I'm not that guy in the stands like, you asshole, you're a loser. Ah. And I used to think like that, like, what a stupid call. I used to think that your shoulders had to touch, and it's not. So when I thought someone wasn't pinned and they called the pin, I was thinking they weren't pinned, but they were really pinned because I didn't know what a pin was, right? Or my kid getting called for caution on a referee stance because he's on the top. I didn't realize that your foot has to be between their feet and your knee can't touch here, and like little
Yeah.
things that I've learned throughout the process, to where I can look there. And then I've had, you know, referee Coach Cipriano on doing some Ask the Ref stuff, and we did the 27 hand signals. I don't know if you saw it; it's on the YouTube page. But I did that for coaches like yourself to be able to give that to new kids, new parents to see. Okay, well, when they go like this and they go like this, or they do something, why do they do that? What happened there? So that they can understand that, because in the stands is, you know, a lot of those arguments take place and stuff. And I think it's more of lack of knowledge. I went on and I don't know why I did it, but it educated me. I went on and did bronze certification a couple weeks ago, and I got bronze certified for whatever reason, but I got knowledge, right? So I can't wait to be out there and go, hey, I know why they do that now, or being at the practice room going, hey, that makes sense,
Yeah.
or seeing what's going on at a tournament and thinking before, what the hell do they do that? Oh, got it. So it's just been a blessing for me. So I can't wait to see how I view wrestling
Hmm.
when I'm at a tournament outside of this, knowing what I've learned through this. It's pretty cool, especially talking to coaches. Most of you guys are pretty positive and motivating and have a purpose for your children.
Hmm.
So not just your blood children, but your children
Yeah.
in general, your coaching, and just hearing how they talk to people going into a big match, and maybe you're 0-30 and that kid's best in the country, and how you guys tell that kid to change his mind so he doesn't go in thinking, oh my God, I'm gonna get crushed in 30 seconds. So little things like that to be able to tell my son, and you know, hopefully one day when I'm old and grayer, he'll watch these and learn something. But it's just I can't wait to just be a part of it and smell the sweat again and be in the room again, and you know, feed the kids and bring the coolers and just the whole atmosphere, and the parents you've never even met all of a sudden you're best friends with because this brings you together. And
Yeah.
I just love that, and I can't wait. I want to make sure I get your book. I want to make sure my kids read your book. I got Richard Jensen sent me a book when I had him on, and my wife is making my 14-year-old do a book report with it and,
Sweet.
and talk about it and stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm going to send you a copy of my book too. So whenever we connect after this, then I'll get your address and so I can ship you a book. But
yeah, cool, man. Please, and post all your stuff on there, and let's do it. And you know, I talked to Richard. I'm trying to figure out this whole shop thing on these pages. I don't know if you know anything about Facebook business pages. Maybe you can help, or I can reach out to some social media guy. But I told him he's welcome to. I'll put his book up in my shop. I'll put your book up in my shop. I don't have a problem with that. So I just got to figure out how to do it. I think you guys have to. Maybe there's a PayPal account so you guys get paid. I don't know how to make it work, but I learn every day. I actually can go live now, so I'm doing
yeah.
this. So I'll figure it out, and then you can throw it up there.
Yeah.
Uh, and then I don't need anything monetarily for it or whatever. Just another platform for you to make good things happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, real quick, one, as you were talking right there about educating yourself, which is huge, but then about just smelling the sweat and being in the atmosphere and becoming friends with these other parents. I have, one of my wrestlers made the finals to the Olympic trials. I have another one who's a 3-time All-American at Stanford. So I've had these kids with these, that have had a lot of success, right? And these other things. It's funny, state champions or kids that didn't place, either way. When they come back in the room or when I talk to them, they don't talk about like winning that state championship. They don't talk about their wins and losses. What they talk about are like sitting in the stands with their friends. They talk about, the travel on the way to the meet or the overnight stays in the hotels. They talk about the experiences, the best kids I've had and the worst kids I've had, right? And when it comes to wins, losses, whatever, they all talk about the experiences and the culture. And those are the things that they love. And ultimately, man, those are things we have to remember. Like, do we want to win? Yeah, winning is fun and losing is just not very fun. But there's like so many other great things. And just being part of this and being part of this big family is huge. And coaches got to remember that. I mean, the journey is like, that's the part that these kids remember for the rest of their lives. And that's the part that impacts them so much. And for us coaches and parents, same thing. Those are the things that we ultimately value.
Yeah, I fell in love with it. I got the bug. I just, I grew up around sports. I was an athlete, I never wrestled, but I was, 70 pounds ago. I did some basketball, football, tennis, whatever, baseball, but I was around all those sports, and sports in general are good, and there's good people in all those sports. but the culture was just different when I walked into a wrestling room. And I can't explain. When I went to that first off-season tournament I found by Google, I had no idea what off-season was. I typed Google wrestling, whatever. I found an AAU tournament. And I go in there, and next thing I know, I got 50 friends, and they're sending me stuff about clubs and where I should take my kid to get better. And I'm like, okay, thanks. But that was that first step, and just fell in love with it. So here I am, and I can't wait to really like take a tour around the country just to say thank you to everybody for coming on the show, and be able to actually get into a room and say, hey, I'm here with Chad Parks in Topeka, Kansas.
Yeah.
We're eating German food. So this is what beer cocks are, whatever they're called, beer rocks.
Beer rocks, yeah.
Yeah. I was like, hey, I like it. Maybe I'll have to do a one of those shows where I travel the country, like wrestling and food. So
Yeah.
the clubs and the food that come with it.
Yeah, it'd be awesome. Absolutely be awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely better than tournament day where the kids are like, just bring Gatorade and peanut butter crackers. Yeah.
100%.
All right, buddy. Hey, thank you so much for coming on, man. Like I said, man, it's just a blessing to speak to someone like yourself, and it's just an absolute honor. So keep doing what you're doing. I tell people, and yes, I know he's a Christian, but I say just keep kicking life's ass.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. Yep.
All right, buddy.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes.